The farm was started by my parents. They bought the land in 1967. It was a 60-acre farm on the market, and they were from the Netherlands, so they were, looking to move somewhere. It was hard enough to get into farming because the Netherlands was so populated and so on there. So they bought the farm from an electrician who was emigrating to Canada, and at the time it was just a farm like the other ones around here, but they had a horticultural background, so they started into growing fruit, vegetables in the early years as well, even the likes of tulips and so on, and eventually, I suppose over the years it became more and more specialised in fruit. Now we've got about 40 acres of apples, a few acres of plums, a few acres of strawberries, some cherries and some raspberries. So those are our crops, shall we say. So there's about 25 people working on the farm altogether, and that's split between various things that we do. And so we make apple juice, we make cider vinegar, we make other types of fruit drinks, you could say. Then we've got a farm shop on the farm, and there's usually 2 or 3 people in there looking after customers and getting out orders and things like that. And then most of the rest of the people are out in the fields, so there's probably always like 10 people outside, either harvesting apples or strawberries, or at the moment we're harvesting it. Today we're harvesting apples and strawberries, so there's some people in the tunnels harvesting strawberries and some outside picking apples. There's a few advantages to growing apples in Ireland because it doesn't get over hot here, and apple trees don't like it especially hot, so it's not like citrus or something, in the south of Spain or whatever. So they do like a temperate climate, but sometimes our temperature is a bit too cold for them as well. So somewhere probably ideal for an apple would be, somewhere in the middle of France or whatever, where it's a bit warmer than here, but not as hot as Spain. We're on a little bit on the cooler side, and we're a little bit on the wetter side as well in a typical year. And the issue, I suppose, with the wetness is that we can get some diseases of the plant that mightn't occur in a more arid environment. So we do have a little bit more in disease management to do in the orchards, and that would be familiar to any grain farmer growing wheat or barley or whatever. They'd be spraying against rusts or stuff like that. The advantages are that it's not too hot, so they don't suffer huge stress. And being an island, there are various pests that aren't here as well that continental growers have to cope with. So we have many less pests to deal with, and the pest pressure is never that high. So we can manage our pests pretty much entirely without insecticides, or maybe an occasional, insecticide once every few years or whatever. So that side of things is actually quite nice in growing apples in Ireland. Now our yields, if it is hotter, the yields will tend to be a bit higher. So our tons per acre, an apple crop will give you usually around 20 tons the acre, is a bit less than what you might get in a hotter climate as well. Especially if you go back 10 years or whatever, things like, in general, foods were cheaper than they are now. I think everyone has seen, not everyone, but a lot of farmers have seen, an increase in the farm gate price of some of the things that they're selling to shops, which was really essential because it had not kept pace with the cost of inputs and so on. And we've had a similar situation in apples and in other fruits as well, where the prices have gone up, which of course feeds through to consumers. They end up paying more as well, which is the downside of that. But for us, having the farm shop and that here meant that we weren't relying on taking the price that was, that was prevailing in the marketplace necessarily. Even if you get an extra 15-20% by selling direct to consumer, that's a big assistance to your overall profitability bottom line or what have you. And then we also have the processing here, which means we don't have to sell off the second quality apples very cheap, because we can use them in our own processing for the juice or for the vinegar or for the sliced apples or what have you. I suppose the cohort of growers is getting smaller over the years. The output is kind of staying similar because people are, upping the acreages and stuff like that. But if you don't have, succession or somebody that wants to take over a farm or whatever, it does come to an end, and that's where you're tending to see the loss of people or smaller number of growers, which is an awful pity, because no more than in any farming you need to have successors to, for it to be sustainable in the longer run.